I'm Mira Patel, 26 years old. Until 2 months ago, I believed family meant protecting each other's dreams, not stealing them. Then watching my sister accept a Global Innovation Award for my invention changed everything. The applause still haunts me, thousands of people celebrating her brilliance while I sat in my studio apartment, eating microwaved leftovers and staring at my original prototype gathering dust on my desk. Lena's words from that night echo constantly. This device represents my life's work, my passion for mental health innovation. What she didn't know was that I had been her silent supporter for 8 years, covering her rent during unemployment, believing in her potential even when she didn't believe in herself. Before I tell you how I reclaimed what was mine, let me ask you something that still keeps me awake. What would you do if the person you trusted most stole your future and convinced the world it was theirs? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My story begins in the cramped 2-bedroom apartment Lena and I shared in San Francisco's Mission District, where the walls were thin enough to hear our neighbors' late-night Netflix binges, and the rent was just barely within our combined budget. I remember the exact moment my invention was born. Not in some sleek laboratory or innovation hub, but on our thrift store couch at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, surrounded by empty coffee cups and the soft glow of my laptop screen. I'd been struggling with anxiety attacks for months, the kind that hit without warning and left me gasping for air in grocery store aisles or during important meetings. The episodes were unpredictable, embarrassing, and completely derailing my life as a bioengineering graduate student at Stanford. Traditional therapy helped, but I needed something more immediate, something that could catch the spiral before it became a full-blown panic attack. That's when the idea struck me. What if there was a wearable device that could detect the early, physiological markers of anxiety, elevated heart rate, skin conductance changes, irregular breathing patterns, and intervene with gentle, personalized coping strategies before the panic took hold? I spent the next 6 months obsessively researching, coding, and building. My prototype was crude but functional, a sleek bracelet that monitored biometric data and connected to a discrete earpiece that would whisper breathing exercises or grounding techniques when it detected anxiety spikes. I called it Breathe Easy, and it worked. Not perfectly, but well enough that my own anxiety attacks became manageable for the first time in years. Lena watched this entire process unfold from our shared kitchen table, where she'd sit with her laptop, supposedly job hunting after being laid off from her PR position at a startup that had burned through its funding. She was 31 then, 3 years older than me, and the layoff had shattered her confidence in a way I'd never seen before. Growing up, Lena had always been the golden child, the one who could charm teachers, win student council elections, and make our parents beam with pride at family gatherings. Our parents, Asha and Raj Patel, had immigrated from Gujarat when Lena was 2, and I was still in our mother's womb. They'd sacrificed everything to give us opportunities they'd never had, working double shifts at a small grocery store they eventually managed to buy. Dad always said we were living proof that the American dream was real, but the pressure of representing that dream weighed differently on each of us. Lena embraced the spotlight, thriving on external validation and public recognition. She studied communications and marketing, naturally gravitating toward roles where her charisma could shine. I, on the other hand, found comfort in quiet spaces, laboratories, libraries, the peaceful corners where problems could be solved through careful analysis rather than persuasive presentations. But after the layoff, Lena's confidence crumbled. She'd spend entire days in her pajamas, scrolling through job boards and growing increasingly frustrated with rejection emails. I watched my vibrant, ambitious sister disappear into someone I barely recognized, anxious, bitter, and desperately seeking any opportunity to rebuild her sense of self-worth. That's why, when she started showing interest in my project, I was thrilled. Finally, something that could bring us together, something where her marketing expertise could complement my technical skills. She'd ask thoughtful questions about the device's functionality, suggest improvements to the user interface, and even helped me create more polished presentation materials. "You're brilliant, Mira," she'd say, looking over my shoulder as I refined the algorithm that detected anxiety patterns. "But you need to think bigger. This isn't just a personal project. This could help millions of people." She was right, of course. The more I researched, the more I realized the massive market potential for accessible mental health technology. Anxiety disorders affected nearly 40 million adults in the United States alone, and existing solutions were either expensive, inaccessible, or ineffective for many people. My device could democratize anxiety management in a way that traditional therapy and medication couldn't. Lena helped me develop a comprehensive business plan, complete with market analysis, competitive landscape research, and financial projections. She had a natural instinct for identifying what investors would want to hear and how to frame technical innovations in terms of human impact and market opportunity. Working together felt like discovering a new dimension to our relationship, one where our different strengths could create something neither of us could achieve alone. I remember the night I finally perfected the prototype's core functionality. The device had successfully predicted and prevented 3 potential anxiety attacks during a particularly stressful week of graduate school presentations. I was exhausted, but exhilarated, finally ready to take the next step toward bringing Breathe easy to market. "We should celebrate," Lena said, emerging from her room with a bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion. "This is incredible, Mira. You've created something that could change people's lives." We stayed up until dawn that night, talking about our shared vision for the company we'd build together. Lena would handle marketing, business development, and investor relations, all the areas where I felt completely out of my depth. I would focus on product development, technical improvements, and the scientific validation that would be crucial for gaining medical community acceptance. It felt perfect. Too perfect, as I would later realize. The first red flag appeared 3 weeks later, when Lena mentioned she'd been casually networking at tech industry events around the city. She'd come home energized from these meetups, full of insights about the startup ecosystem and connections she was making with potential investors and collaborators. "You should come with me to the next one," she suggested. "It would be good for you to start building relationships in the industry." But I was deep in the middle of final exams and thesis work, completely overwhelmed with academic responsibilities. "Maybe next time," I'd say, trusting that Lena was representing our project accurately and ethically. I should have paid more attention to the subtle changes in how she talked about the invention. Instead of Mira's device, or our project, she started referring to it as the technology I'm developing, or my innovation. At the time, I assumed she was just taking ownership of her role in the business side of things, but those small linguistic shifts were the beginning of something much larger. The second red flag was harder to ignore. I'd been working on a particularly complex aspect of the anxiety prediction algorithm when I realized I needed some of my original research notes. They weren't in my usual files, so I asked Lena if she'd seen them. "Oh, I borrowed them for a presentation I was putting together," she said casually. "I wanted to make sure I understood all the technical details correctly when I talked to potential partners." "What kind of presentation?" I asked. "Just an overview of the project for some people who might be interested in investing or collaborating." "Nothing formal yet." Something in her tone made me uncomfortable, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. Lena had always been good at managing details I found overwhelming, and I trusted her to handle the business aspects responsibly. The third red flag should have been impossible to miss, but I was so consumed with my own academic pressures that I completely overlooked its significance. Lena started dressing differently, more professionally, with an attention to detail that suggested important meetings rather than casual networking events. She'd leave the apartment early and return, late, always with vague explanations about exploring opportunities or building relationships. When I asked for specifics, she'd deflect with comments like, "I don't want to get your hopes up until something concrete develops," or You know how these things work. Lots of conversations before anything real happens. I should have insisted on being included. I should have demanded transparency about who she was meeting and what she was telling them about our project. Instead, I gave her the space I thought she needed to rebuild her professional confidence, trusting that our shared vision would keep us aligned. The final red flag appeared the week before everything exploded. I'd been working late in the university lab when I decided to surprise Lena with takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant. When I got home, I could hear her on a phone call in her room, speaking in the confident, polished tone she used for professional conversations. "The device represents a breakthrough in preventive mental health technology," she was saying. "I've been developing it for over 2 years, and we're finally ready to move toward commercialization." I stood frozen in our hallway, holding containers of pad thai and trying to process what I'd just heard. 2 years? She'd only been involved with the project for 6 months, and I've been developing it. Not we, not my sister and I, but I. When she emerged from her room 20 minutes later, I was sitting at our kitchen table, the food cold and untouched between us. "How was the lab?" she asked, seemingly oblivious to my shock. "Who were you talking to?" I asked directly. "Just someone from a startup accelerator. They're interested in learning more about innovative health technologies." "You told them you'd been developing the device for 2 years. Lena's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but I caught the flash of something that looked like panic before she composed herself. "I was talking about the broader research I've been doing in mental health technology," she said smoothly. "You know I've been interested in this space for a long time." It was a lie. Before my anxiety struggles, Lena had never shown any particular interest in mental health issues. Her background was in traditional marketing and public relations, focused on consumer products and corporate communications. But I wanted to believe her explanation. I needed to believe that my sister, my closest friend, my potential business partner, wasn't systematically erasing my role in the creation of something I'd poured my heart and soul into. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every subtle shift in language, every moment when I'd felt something was off, but had dismissed my concerns as paranoia or academic stress. I didn't know it yet, but while I was lying there questioning my own perceptions, Lena was in her room preparing for the presentation that would change both of our lives forever. The presentation where she would pitch my invention as her own original work, launching the betrayal that would define the next chapter of our relationship. Looking back now, I can see how methodically she'd laid the groundwork, how carefully she'd positioned herself as the primary innovator while gradually minimizing my role. But in that moment, I was still innocent enough to believe that family meant something, that the bond between sisters was stronger than ambition or desperation. I was about to learn how wrong I could be. The morning everything changed started like any other Thursday. I woke up to the smell of Lena's expensive coffee, the kind she splurged on even when we were splitting ramen packets for dinner, and found her at the kitchen table, dressed in her best blazer, laptop closed, staring out the window with an expression I couldn't read. "Big meeting today?" I asked, pouring myself coffee from the pot she'd made. "Something like that," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Wish me luck." "Always," I replied, meaning it completely. I spent that day in the Stanford bioengineering lab, running final tests on my latest prototype improvements. The device was performing better than ever. The anxiety prediction accuracy had improved to 87%, and I'd successfully miniaturized the components enough that the bracelet looked like fashionable jewelry rather than medical equipment. I was excited to show Lena the progress when I got home. But when I returned to our apartment that evening, Lena wasn't there. Her room was unusually tidy, with several outfits laid out on her bed as if she'd been preparing for something important for days. On her desk, I noticed a folder labeled "Breathe Easy Investor Presentation" that I'd never seen before. My stomach dropped. I opened the folder with trembling hands, and what I found inside made me sink onto her desk chair, struggling to breathe. ironically, experiencing the exact kind of anxiety Spike My device was designed to prevent. The presentation was professional, polished, and comprehensive. It included detailed technical specifications of my invention, market analysis I'd helped research, financial projections we'd developed together, and a timeline of development milestones. But throughout the entire 40-slide deck, my name appeared exactly 0 times. The presenter bio read, Lena Patel, Founder and Chief Technology Officer, MS in Bioengineering, Stanford University. 3 years of dedicated research in preventive mental health technology. I stared at that last line until the words blurred. 3 years? Lena didn't have a master's degree in bioengineering. She had a bachelor's in communications from UC Berkeley. She hadn't spent 3 years researching anything related to mental health. And she definitely wasn't the founder of technology she'd had no role in creating. But there it was, in black and white, presented with the kind of confident authority that had always made Lena so compelling to others. My hands were shaking as I flipped through slides that detailed my innovative approach to anxiety prediction and my breakthrough in wearable mental health technology. Every technical detail was accurate, because I'd explained it all to her, but every personal pronoun was wrong. The final slide was the most devastating. Seeking $2.5 million in Series A, funding to bring Breathe Easy to market and revolutionize mental health care accessibility. She wasn't just stealing credit for my work. She was trying to build an entire company around it, positioning herself as the brilliant innovator who deserved millions of dollars in investment for technology she had never created. I sat in her room for 3 hours, reading and rereading the presentation, trying to find some explanation that would make this betrayal make sense. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she'd planned to add my name before the actual presentation. Maybe this was just a rough draft she'd put together to test investor interest before we formalized our partnership. But deep down, I knew none of those explanations were true. The presentation was too polished, too complete, too deliberately crafted to erase my existence from the story of my own invention. Lena came home at 11:30 p.m., practically glowing with excitement. I heard her keys in the door, followed by the sound of her heels clicking across our hardwood floors as she headed toward her room. When she saw me sitting at her desk, the presentation open in front of me, her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, defiance, and finally, a kind of desperate determination. Mira, she said carefully, I can explain. Explain what? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hurricane of emotions tearing through my chest. Explain how you have a master's degree you never earned? Explain how you've been researching mental health technology for 3 years when you learned about anxiety disorders from watching me struggle with them 6 months ago? Or explain how you're seeking $2.5 million for my invention without mentioning that I exist? Lena closed her bedroom door behind her and sat on her bed, facing me across the small room that suddenly felt like a courtroom. It's not that simple, she began. The investor world doesn't work the way you think it does. They want to see clear leadership, a single vision, someone who can take full responsibility for the technology and the business. So you decided that someone should be you? I decided that someone needed to be the face of this project if we wanted it to succeed, she said, her voice gaining strength as she built her argument. You hate presentations. You get nervous talking to strangers. You've said 100 times that you want to focus on the technical development while someone else handles the business side. That doesn't mean you get to pretend you invented the device. I'm not pretending, Lena said, and for a moment I thought I saw genuine conviction in her eyes. I've been working on this project for months. I've contributed research, market analysis, business strategy. Contributing to a business plan is not the same as inventing the technology, I interrupted, and you know it. We stared at each other across her small bedroom, and I realized I was seeing my sister clearly for the first time in months. The guilt that had flickered across her face when she found me with the presentation had been replaced by something harder, more calculating. How did the meeting go? I asked quietly. Lena's expression shifted again, and I caught a glimpse of the excitement she'd been trying to suppress since walking in the door. They're interested, she said. Very interested. 3 different firms want follow-up meetings, and one of them is talking about fast-tracking us for their accelerator program. They're interested in you, I corrected, based on lies about your background and your role in creating the technology. They're interested in Breathe Easy, she shot back. The device you created but have no idea how to bring to market. The innovation that could help millions of people, but will sit gathering dust in our apartment if someone doesn't step up and make it happen. So you appointed yourself? I volunteered, Lena said, and there was something in her tone that reminded me of how she used to argue with our parents when we were teenagers. Righteous, defensive, absolutely convinced of her own moral authority. Without asking me. Without telling me. Without even mentioning that I exist in your investor presentations. Because I knew you'd react exactly like this, she said, standing up and beginning to pace the small space between her bed and desk. You'd get scared and start making excuses about why we should wait, why the technology isn't ready, why we need more research before we can move forward. Maybe because those are valid concerns. Or maybe because you're terrified of success, Lena said, and her words hit me like a physical blow. Maybe because you're so comfortable being the quiet genius in the background that you can't imagine stepping into the spotlight and claiming what you've accomplished. I stared at her, recognizing the manipulation technique she'd perfected over years of family arguments. Take a kernel of truth about someone's insecurities and weaponize it to justify your own questionable behavior. This isn't about my fear of success, I said slowly. This is about you stealing my work and lying to investors about who created it. I didn't steal anything, Lena said, her voice rising. I've been part of this project from the beginning. I've put in hundreds of hours developing the business strategy, researching the market, building relationships with potential partners. Based on my invention, based on our shared vision. We were both standing now, facing each other across a divide that felt much wider than the few feet of bedroom space between us. Show me one technical document you created, I said. Show me one piece of code you wrote, one circuit you designed, one algorithm you developed. Lena's jaw tightened. You know that's not my area of expertise. Exactly. Because you didn't invent anything. You're not a bioengineering graduate student. You don't have 3 years of research experience in mental health technology. You're not the founder of Breathe Easy. You're my sister who helped with the business plan for an invention you had no role in creating. And you're someone who created something amazing, but lacks the vision and courage to bring it to the world, Lena replied. So maybe we need each other. Not like this, I said. Not with lies about your credentials and erasing my existence from the story. Lena sat back down on her bed, and for the first time since I'd confronted her, she looked genuinely uncertain. What do you want me to do? She asked. Call them back and say I made a mistake? Tell them I misrepresented my background? Destroy the opportunity we've been working toward for months? I want you to tell the truth. The truth is complicated. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. No, it's not, I said. The truth is that I invented Breathe Easy. The truth is that you helped me develop a business plan. The truth is that we could have been partners if you'd approached this honestly instead of stealing credit for work you didn't do. Lena was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. They want to meet with me again on Monday, she said finally. The lead investor from Hartwell Ventures said this could be exactly the kind of preventive health technology they've been looking for, as long as they think you invented it. As long as they believe in the vision and the leadership, she corrected. I realized then that we weren't just having an argument about credit or recognition. We were having a fundamental disagreement about reality, about ethics, about what constituted theft versus collaboration. I can't let you do this, I said. Lena looked up at me, and her expression hardened into something I'd never seen before, a mixture of desperation and determination that made her look like a stranger. "You can't stop me," she said quietly. "The presentations are scheduled, the relationships are built, the momentum is already in motion. I'll tell them the truth." "And say what? That your unemployed sister with a communications degree somehow tricked multiple sophisticated investors into believing she invented complex bioengineering technology. That you, the actual inventor, just sat quietly in the background while someone else took credit for your work." Lena shook her head. "It makes you look either complicit or completely naive." I felt the walls of her logic closing in around me, and I realized she'd thought through this conversation much more thoroughly than I had. She'd anticipated my objections and prepared responses designed to make me feel like the unreasonable one for expecting honesty and basic ethical behavior. "This is who you are?" I asked. "This is who my sister really is?" For just a moment, Lena's carefully constructed facade cracked, and I saw something that looked like genuine remorse flicker across her face. "This is who I have to be," she said, softly. "This is who the situation requires me to be." I stood up and walked toward her bedroom door, pausing with my hand on the handle. "The situation didn't require anything," I said. "You chose this. You chose to lie, to steal, to betray the person who trusted you most. Own that choice, Lena. But don't pretend it was inevitable." I left her room and went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about everything I'd lost in the space of a single conversation. Not just credit for my invention, but my relationship with my sister, my trust in family bonds, and my naive belief that good people don't deliberately hurt the ones they love. What I didn't know yet was that Lena's Monday meeting would go even better than she'd hoped, and that within 2 weeks, she'd have a formal investment offer that would transform her from unemployed communications graduate to celebrated tech entrepreneur. What I also didn't know was that her success would come at a cost much higher than either of us had anticipated, and that the web of lies she'd started weaving would eventually trap us both in ways neither of us could foresee. The weeks following my confrontation with Lena passed in a strange, suspended kind of existence. We continued living in the same apartment, sharing the same kitchen and bathroom, but we might as well have been strangers. She'd leave early for meetings I wasn't invited to, and return late with updates about progress I wasn't part of. I'd spend my days in the lab, throwing myself into academic work that suddenly felt meaningless compared to watching my life's passion being stolen in real time. The silence between us was deafening, broken only by the most basic logistical communications necessary for coexistence. "I'll be gone this weekend. The rent check is on the counter. There's leftover pizza in the fridge." We moved around each other like ghosts, occupying the same physical space while living in completely separate emotional realities. 3 weeks. After our confrontation, Lena came home with news that shattered what remained of my naive hope that she might come to her senses and correct course. "I got the funding," she announced, standing in our living room doorway with a bottle of champagne and an expression that mixed triumph with something that looked almost like apology. I was sitting on our couch, supposedly studying for my comprehensive exams, but actually staring at my laptop screen, unable to concentrate on anything academic while my future was being systematically dismantled. "How much?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. $2.7 million, she said. Series, a round led by Hartwell Ventures, with participation from 3 other firms. The number hit me like a physical blow. $2.7 million for technology I'd created in our shared apartment. Technology that had grown out of my personal struggle with anxiety. Technology that represented 2 years of sleepless nights and countless iterations and the kind of breakthrough innovation that most engineers only dream of achieving. "Congratulations," I said, and the word tasted like poison in my mouth. Lena set the champagne on our coffee table but didn't open it. "Mira, I want you to be part of this. I've always wanted you to be part of this." "As what?" Your silent technical consultant while you collect accolades for inventing something I created? As Chief Technology Officer, she said. Full-time position? Competitive salary? Equity stake in the company? I stared at her, trying to process what she was offering. Chief Technology Officer of a company built around my own invention, working for my sister who had convinced investors she was the brilliant innovator behind breakthrough mental health technology. You want me to work for you, I said slowly. I want us to work together, the way we always planned. Except now you're the CEO and founder, and I'm the employee you're graciously offering to hire. Lena sat down on the opposite end of our couch, carefully maintaining physical distance while trying to bridge the emotional chasm that had opened between us. The investor community responds to clear leadership structures, she said, falling back on the business justification she'd been perfecting for weeks. Someone has to be the public face of the company. Someone has to take ultimate responsibility for strategic decisions. And you decided that someone should be you. I decided that someone should be the person who's comfortable with public speaking, investor relations, media interviews. All the aspects of running a company that you've told me 100 times you have no interest in doing. It was a rational argument, and that's what made it so insidious. Lena was taking my genuine preferences and personality traits and using them to justify a betrayal that had nothing to do with optimal business structure and everything to do with her desperate need to rebuild her professional identity. What's my official title going to be? I asked. Inventor of the core technology? Creator of the breakthrough innovation that attracted $2.7 million in funding? Lena looked uncomfortable, for the first time since she'd walked in with her champagne and job offer. The investor narrative is already established, she said carefully. Changing it now would raise questions about credibility and leadership that could jeopardize the entire funding round. So I'm supposed to pretend I had no role in creating the technology that's the foundation of the entire company. You're supposed to be part of building something amazing that could help millions of people, Lena said, her voice gaining passion as she spoke. This is bigger than either of us, Mira. This is about taking your brilliant invention and scaling it to reach everyone who could benefit from it. My brilliant invention that you're taking credit for. My role as CEO that allows your brilliant invention to reach its full potential. We were talking in circles, and I realized that no amount of logical argument was going to penetrate the wall of justification Lena had built around her actions. She'd convinced herself that stealing credit for my work was actually a noble sacrifice she was making for the greater good. I need to think about it, I said. The offer expires Friday, she replied. I start building the team next week, with or without you. The ultimatum hung between us like a sword. Accept her terms and become a well-compensated employee working on my own stolen invention, or refuse and watch her build a company around my technology without any involvement from me at all. That night, I called Tariq. Tariq Salim had been my lab partner during my first year of graduate school, before I'd switched focus to independent research on anxiety-related bioengineering. He was brilliant, principled, and one of the few people who understood both the technical complexity of my work and the personal journey that had inspired it. We'd been close, closer than I'd admitted to myself at the time, but I'd pulled away from our friendship when my anxiety symptoms were at their worst, too ashamed to let him see me struggling and too proud to ask for help. By the time I'd developed Breathe Easy and started managing my mental health more effectively, Tariq had graduated and taken a position at a startup accelerator in Palo Alto. Mira? His voice was surprised, but warm when he answered my call. I was just thinking about you. How's the anxiety research going? The question hit me harder than I'd expected, and I realized I was about to cry for the first time since discovering Lena's betrayal. It's complicated, I managed to say. Tariq picked up on the distress in my voice immediately. Are you okay? What's happening? I told him everything. The invention, the betrayal, the funding, the job offer. I talked for 45 minutes straight, while Tariq listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions. but mostly just giving me the space to voice the emotions I'd been carrying alone for weeks. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Jesus, Mira," he said finally. "I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to take her offer just so I can stay connected to the technology I created. But another part of me feels like accepting would be endorsing what she did, becoming complicit in my own erasure. What does your gut tell you? That this is wrong? That what she's doing is theft, not partnership? That accepting her terms would be abandoning any hope of getting proper recognition for work that represents the best thing I've ever accomplished?" "Then don't accept," Tariq said simply. "But if I don't, she'll build the company without me. My invention will succeed, help people, maybe change the mental health industry, and I'll have no part in any of it. Or," Tariq said carefully, "you could build your own path forward." "What do you mean?" "I mean you're talking like Lena owns your future because she stole your past," he said. "But you're still the person who created breakthrough anxiety detection technology. You still have the knowledge, the skills, the innovative thinking that led to that breakthrough. She has the investors, the funding, the business infrastructure. And you have something she'll never have," Tariq replied, "the ability to do it again." I hadn't considered that possibility. I'd been so focused on the specific injustice of losing credit for Breathe Easy that I hadn't thought about my capacity to create something new, something better, something entirely my own. "The accelerator where I work specializes in health technology, startups," Tariq continued. "I could introduce you to people who would be very interested in supporting an innovator with your background and capabilities." "You mean start over?" "I mean start fresh, without the baggage of family betrayal, without the ethical compromises, without having to share credit with someone who didn't earn it." The idea was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Starting over would mean abandoning any claim to Breathe Easy, accepting that Lena would build her empire around my stolen work. But it would also mean freedom. The freedom to innovate without manipulation, to build something entirely my own, to prove that my breakthrough wasn't a fluke, but the beginning of a career defined by authentic achievement. "Think about it," Tariq said. "And either way, I'm here if you need support. What happened to you is wrong, and you don't have to navigate it alone." After we hung up, I sat in my room staring at my original Breathe Easy prototype, the crude but functional device that had started everything. It looked so simple sitting there on my desk, a basic wristband connected to a small processing unit. Nothing that would suggest it was worth millions of dollars in investment, or that it had the power to destroy a family. But that device represented something more important than money or recognition. It represented my ability to identify problems and create solutions, to turn personal struggle into innovation that could help others. Lena could steal credit for this specific invention, but she couldn't steal the mind that had created it. On Thursday night, I made my decision. I walked into the living room where Lena was working on her laptop, probably preparing for meetings with her new investors and planning the company she'd built on lies about her own capabilities. "I'm not taking the job," I said. She looked up from her screen, and I saw something that might have been relief flicker across her face. "Are you sure?" she asked. "This is an incredible opportunity." "It's an incredible opportunity built on theft," I replied, "and I won't be part of legitimizing what you've done." Lena closed her laptop and looked at me directly for the first time in weeks. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said. "I genuinely hoped we could work through this together." "We could have," I said, "if you'd approached it honestly from the beginning. I did what I thought was best for the project and for both of us." "You did what you thought was best for you," I corrected, "and you convinced yourself it was best for everyone else." We stared at each other across the living room that had once felt like home and now felt like a crime scene. "What are you going to do?" Lena asked. "I'm going to move out," I said. "And then I'm going to build something better than Breathe Easy." something that's entirely mine. For just a moment, I saw fear flash across Lena's face. Not guilt or remorse, but the fear of competition, the recognition that I might succeed in ways that would expose her own limitations. "Good luck," she said, but her tone suggested she didn't mean it. "I won't need luck," I replied. "I have something you'll never have." "What's that?" "The ability to create something from nothing," I said. "Without stealing, without lying, without betraying the people who trust me." I walked back to my room and started packing, beginning the process of separating my life from the sister who had taught me that family bonds could be broken by ambition, and that love was conditional on convenience. What I didn't know yet was that leaving would be the easy part. The hard part would be rebuilding my sense of self, learning to trust my own instincts again, and finding the courage to pursue success without compromising my integrity. But as I folded clothes and packed books and carefully wrapped my original prototype, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Not hope that Lena would change or that our relationship could be repaired, but hope that I could build something better on my own terms. It was a small beginning, but it was entirely mine. Moving out of the apartment I'd shared with Lena felt like escaping a crime scene where I'd been both victim and witness. I found a tiny studio in Berkeley, close enough to campus that I could walk to the lab, but far enough from San Francisco that I wouldn't accidentally run into my sister at the coffee shops and tech meetups where she was building her stolen empire. Sector studio was barely 400 square feet, with a kitchen that consisted of a hot plate and a mini fridge, but it was mine in a way that our shared apartment had never been. No one could go through my research notes without permission. No one could borrow my ideas and return them transformed into someone else's intellectual property. The space was small, but it was honest. I threw myself into my academic work with an intensity that surprised even me. My comprehensive exams were approaching, and I channeled all my anger and betrayal into studying, research, and a thesis project that was beginning to evolve beyond anything I'd originally planned. If Lena wanted to build a company around my anxiety detection technology, I'd develop something so far beyond Breathe Easy that her stolen innovation would look primitive by comparison. But late at night, alone in my studio with only the hum of traffic from University Avenue for company, the isolation would hit me like a physical weight. I'd find myself reaching for my phone to text Lena about something interesting I'd discovered in my research, or to share a funny story from the lab, only to remember that we weren't sisters who shared discoveries anymore. We were strangers connected only by genetics and a betrayal that had redefined our entire relationship. The hardest part wasn't losing my invention. The hardest part was losing the person I'd trusted most in the world. 3 months after moving out, I was deep in the library stacks researching neural feedback mechanisms when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Can you come to dinner Sunday? We need to talk as a family." I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decode what "we need to talk as a family" might mean. Our parents knew about the falling out between Lena and me. It was impossible to hide the fact that we'd stopped speaking, and I'd moved out with minimal explanation, but I'd avoided providing details about the invention theft. How do you tell your immigrant parents, who sacrificed everything to give their daughters opportunities for success, that one daughter had stolen the other's breakthrough achievement? Sunday dinner at our parents' house in Fremont had been a monthly tradition for years, but I hadn't attended since the confrontation with Lena. The thought of sitting around our childhood dining table, pretending to be a happy family while my sister enjoyed success built on my stolen work, had been unbearable. But avoiding family dinner forever wasn't sustainable, and part of me was curious about what had prompted my mother's invitation after months of my absence. When I arrived at our parents' house that Sunday, Lena's Tesla was already in the driveway, the kind of luxury car that $2.7 million in startup funding apparently made possible. I sat in my 15-year-old Honda Civic for several minutes, gathering the emotional strength necessary to walk into a house where I'd once felt completely safe, and now felt like I was entering enemy territory. My mother, Asha, greeted me at the door with the kind of hug that suggested she'd been worried about me in ways she hadn't expressed directly. She looked older than I remembered, with new lines around her eyes that I realized might be connected to the family crisis I'd been too proud to explain. "Beta," she said, using the Gujarati endearment that always made me feel like a child. "We've missed you." Lena was in the living room, sitting in the same chair where she used to complain about college coursework and career uncertainty, but now she looked different. More polished, more confident, wearing the kind of designer blouse that suggested regular meetings with important people. Success suited her, and that realization made my chest tight with emotions I didn't want to examine. "Hi, Mira," she said when I entered the room, her tone carefully neutral. "Lena." Our father, Raj, emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of tea, moving with the careful precision that had characterized his approach to everything since immigrating to America 40 years ago. He'd always been a man of few words, but his expressions were eloquent, and the worry in his eyes suggested he understood more about our situation than either Lena or I had told him. "Sit," he said simply, gesturing toward the couch where I'd spent countless childhood afternoons watching Bollywood movies and listening to stories about our family's history in Gujarat. For several minutes, we drank tea and made awkward small talk about my academic progress, Lena's new company, and our parents' recent retirement plans. But underneath the surface pleasantries, there was a tension that felt like a tightly wound spring waiting to release. Finally, my mother set down her teacup and looked directly at both of us. "Your father and I know something serious has happened between you," she said. "We don't understand all the details, but we see our daughters hurting each other, and we see our family breaking apart." I glanced at Lena, wondering how much she'd told them about her startup's origin story, about the technology that had attracted millions in investment, about the sister who'd mysteriously disappeared from her life right around the time her business success began. "We had a disagreement about a work project," Lena said carefully. "Different ideas about how to approach a collaboration." I almost laughed at the euphemism. Different ideas about collaboration was certainly one way to describe systematic intellectual property theft and identity fraud. "What kind of work project?" my father asked. Lena shot me a look that was part warning, part plea. She was asking me to maintain her version of events. To protect the narrative she'd constructed around her success, I invented a medical device, I said slowly. Lena helped me develop a business plan. We disagreed about next steps. It was the most charitable version of events I could manage without outright lying to our parents. But it was still insufficient to convey the scope of what had actually happened. "This device," my mother said, "is this the technology Lena's company is built around?" The question hung in the air like smoke. My mother had always been perceptive, able to read between the lines of her daughter's explanations and identify the important details we tried to hide. Lena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The company is built around innovative mental health technology," she said. "It's complicated." "It's not complicated," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "I invented a wearable device that detects anxiety attacks before they happen." Lena took my research, my prototype, and my business plan, and convinced investors she'd created everything herself. The silence that followed was deafening. My father set down his teacup with the careful precision of someone trying to maintain composure in the face of devastating news. My mother's expression shifted through several emotions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, a kind of sad recognition. "Is this true?" she asked Lena. "The situation is more nuanced than Mira is presenting," Lena replied. But there was less conviction in her voice than I'd heard in months. "We worked on the project together. The business success required someone to take leadership." "Did you invent the technology?" my father interrupted. Lena looked around the room, at our parents, at me, at the family photos covering the mantle that documented decades of shared holidays and achievements. And for a moment, I thought she might tell the truth. "I developed the business strategy that made the technology viable," she said instead. "That's not what I asked," my father said quietly. Our parents weren't technology entrepreneurs or bioengineering experts, but they understood the difference between creating something and selling something, between innovation and promotion. Mira invented the device, Lena said finally. I built the company around it. By lying about who created it, I added. By taking responsibility for bringing it to market, Lena countered. My mother stood up and walked to the mantel, picking up a framed photo of Lena and me from my college graduation. We were both smiling, arms around each other's shoulders, looking like sisters who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. When your father and I came to this country, she said without turning around, we had nothing except the belief that hard work and honesty would create opportunities for our children. We worked double shifts for 20 years so you could have educations, so you could build careers, so you could achieve things we never dreamed possible. She turned back to face us, still holding the graduation photo. We did not sacrifice everything we had, so one daughter could steal from the other. The yucky words hit Lena like a physical blow. I watched her composure crumble as the full weight of our mother's disappointment settled over her. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Lena said. And for the first time since the betrayal began, her voice sounded genuinely broken. I was unemployed, desperate, watching Mira create something incredible while my own career was falling apart. When the opportunity came to present the technology to investors, I thought, you thought you deserved credit for work you didn't do. My father finished. I thought someone needed to take leadership if the technology was going to succeed, Lena said. Mira hates public speaking, hates business development, hates everything about commercializing innovations. I thought I was helping. By erasing her from her own achievement? My mother asked. Lena was crying now, not the strategic tears of someone trying to manipulate a situation, but the raw, ugly crying of someone finally confronting the magnitude of what they'd done. I got in too deep, she whispered. Once I'd presented myself as the inventor to the first group of investors. I couldn't go back and admit I'd lied. It would have destroyed all credibility, killed the entire opportunity. So you destroyed your relationship with your sister instead, my father said. We sat in our childhood living room, surrounded by photos and memories of better times, while the weight of family betrayal settled over all of us. I realized that Lena hadn't just stolen my invention. She'd stolen our parents' peace of mind, their belief that they'd raise daughters who would support rather than sabotage each other. What happens now? My mother asked. I looked at Lena, crying on the chair where she'd once shared dreams about the business we'd build together, the partnership that would combine her marketing skills with my technical innovations. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, diminished by the weight of lies that had grown beyond her ability to manage. I don't know, I said honestly. The company exists, the funding is real, the technology is being developed. Undoing the lies now might destroy everything, including the possibility that the device could actually help people. What do you want? My father asked me directly. It was a question I'd been avoiding for months, too focused on my anger and sense of injustice to consider what resolution might actually look like. I want credit for my work, I said. I want the world to know that I created the technology that's supposed to revolutionize mental health care. And I want my sister back. The last admission surprised all of us, including me. Despite everything that had happened, despite the betrayal and the lies and the months of silence, I still missed the person Lena had been before desperation had transformed her into someone I didn't recognize. Can you forgive me? Lena asked, looking directly at me for the first time since I'd walked into the house. I don't know, I said. Can you fix this? I don't know how. We stared at each other across the living room that had once felt like the safest place in the world. Two sisters who'd lost each other in the pursuit of success that had come to mean different things to each of us. Figure it out, my mother said firmly. Both of you. Figure out how to be sisters again. How to be honest. Again, how to build something together instead of tearing each other apart. As I drove back to my tiny studio apartment that night, I realized our family dinner had changed something fundamental. Not forgiveness. I wasn't ready for that yet. Not reconciliation. Too much damage had been done for easy repair. But acknowledgement. For the first time since the betrayal began, Lena had admitted the truth about what she'd done, and our parents had witnessed the admission. It wasn't justice, but it was a beginning. 4 months after our family dinner, I was deep into my thesis. Research when Tariq called with news that would change everything. "Mira, you need to see something," he said without preamble. "Can you meet me at the Palo Alto Creamery in an hour?" There was something in his voice, excitement mixed with concern, that made me immediately save my work and grab my keys. Tariq wasn't prone to dramatic requests, so whatever had prompted this urgent meeting was significant. I found him in a corner booth, laptop open, surrounded by printed articles and what looked like investigative research spread across the table. His expression was grim. "Sit down," he said, "and prepare yourself." He turned his laptop screen toward me, revealing an article from TechCrunch with the headline, "Breathe Easy CEO Lena Patel, the rising star revolutionizing mental health technology." My stomach dropped. It was one thing to know abstractly that Lena was building a successful company around my stolen technology. It was another thing entirely to see her face beaming from the screen of a major tech publication, positioned as an innovative genius who was changing the world. "Keep reading," Tariq said quietly. The article was a glowing profile that positioned Lena as a visionary entrepreneur who had identified a critical gap in mental health care and developed breakthrough technology to address it. According to the piece, she had spent over 3 years developing the Breathe Easy device while pursuing advanced bioengineering studies, and had bootstrapped the initial research through personal sacrifice and unwavering dedication to helping anxiety sufferers. Every sentence was a lie built on fragments of truth stolen from my life. "This is bad," I said. "But it's not surprising. She's been telling this story to investors for months." "Keep reading," Tariq repeated. I scrolled down to find a section titled, "The Personal Journey Behind the Innovation," that made my blood run cold. Patel's motivation for developing anxiety detection technology stems from her own struggles with panic disorders during graduate school, the article read. She describes watching her younger sister struggle with similar issues and feeling helpless to provide effective support. I decided I had to create something that could predict and prevent the kind of anxiety spirals that were devastating people I loved, Patel explains. My hands were shaking. Not only had Lena stolen credit for my invention, she'd stolen my personal story, my struggles with anxiety, my journey toward developing technology to manage my mental health, even my relationship. With her as my inspiration, she made herself the hero of your story, Tariq said, his voice tight with anger. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came in the final paragraphs, where Lena discussed her future plans for the company. "Breathe Easy is just the beginning," she was quoted as saying. "We're developing a comprehensive suite of wearable mental health technologies that will transform how people manage anxiety, depression, and other psychological challenges. Our next device will use advanced biometric monitoring to detect early signs of depressive episodes, potentially preventing millions of people from experiencing the devastating impacts of untreated mental illness." I stared at that paragraph, reading it 3 times before the full implications sank in. "She's planning to build an entire company around stealing my ideas," I said. "It gets worse," Tariq said. He flipped to a printed page from a different publication, a trade journal focused on medical device innovation. This interview ran last week. In this piece, Lena had provided even more specific details about her upcoming innovations in mental health technology. She described plans for devices that monitored sleep patterns to predict mood episodes, wearables that detected stress hormones through skin conductance, and even experimental technology that could identify suicidal ideation through speech pattern analysis. Every single concept she described was something I'd discussed with her during our months of collaboration. Ideas I'd been researching and developing as potential extensions of the Breathe Easy platform. This isn't just theft of one invention, I said slowly. She's stealing my entire research agenda. Which brings me to why I called you, Tariq said. He pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. Kellen Vaughn. He's an investigative journalist who specializes in tech industry fraud and misrepresentation. I looked at the card, reading the contact information for someone whose job title was listed as Senior Technology Reporter at a publication I'd never heard of called Silicon Validity. He reached out to me yesterday, Tariq continued. Apparently, he's been researching Lena's background for a potential story, and he's found some inconsistencies that are raising red flags. What kind of inconsistencies? The kind that happen when someone claims to have spent 3 years doing graduate-level bioengineering research at Stanford, but the university has no record of them ever being enrolled in the program. My heart started racing. He knows she lied about her credentials? He suspects it, but he needs more information to build a solid story. Academic records, technical documentation, anything that could prove who actually developed the technology. I stared at the business card, realizing I was holding what might be the key to exposing Lena's fraud and potentially destroying the company she'd built around my stolen work. What does he want from me? The truth, Tariq said simply. He wants to know who really invented Breathe Easy, and he wants evidence to support whatever story emerges from his investigation. The weight of the decision settled over me like a lead blanket. I could provide Kellen with everything he needed. My original research notes, prototype documentation, academic records proving my legitimate background in bioengineering, even email chains between Lena and me that would demonstrate the timeline of her involvement versus my innovation. But exposing Lena's fraud wouldn't just destroy her company. It would destroy her life, her reputation, potentially her ability to ever work in technology again. It would also destroy any chance of reconciliation between us, eliminating even the slim possibility that we might someday repair our relationship. Have you talked to him yet? I asked. I told him I knew someone who might be able to provide relevant information, but I didn't mention your name or give him any specific details, Tariq said. The decision about whether to move forward is entirely yours. I thought about our family dinner 4 months earlier, about Lena crying as she admitted what she'd done, about our mother's plea that we find a way to be sisters again. I thought about the genuine remorse I'd seen in Lena's eyes, and her question about whether I could forgive her. But I also thought about the article I'd just read, about Lena's plans to build an entire empire around stealing my research, about the fact that she wasn't just refusing to correct her original lies, but was actively expanding them into new areas of theft. She's not going to stop, I said. This isn't just about Breathe Easy anymore. She's planning to make a career out of taking credit for my work. Which is why Kellen's investigation could be important, Tariq replied. Not just for you, but for everyone else she might steal from in the future. Or it could be revenge disguised as justice. Tariq leaned back in his booth, studying my face. What does your gut tell you? That I'm tired of being the only person in this situation who's concerned about ethics and honesty, I said. That maybe it's time for consequences to catch up with choices. I picked up Kellen's business card and studied it, weighing the decision that would determine not just my future, but Lena's as well. Will you set up a meeting? I asked. Tariq nodded. Are you sure? No, I said honestly. But I'm sure I can't. Keep living in a world where lying and stealing are rewarded while honesty and integrity are treated as weaknesses. That evening, I sat in my studio apartment staring at my original Breathe Easy prototype and thinking about paths not taken. If Lena had approached our collaboration honestly, we might have built something amazing together. If she had credited me appropriately from the beginning, we might have been partners in both business success and family pride. Instead, her choices had led us to this moment where I was considering actions that would expose her fraud, but also potentially destroy any remaining possibility of sisterhood. My phone buzzed with a text from Tariq. Meeting set for tomorrow, 3 p.m. at Cafe Venetia in Palo Alto. You still have time to change your mind. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I'll be there. As I prepared for bed that night, I realized I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. By agreeing to meet with an investigative journalist, I'd chosen truth over family, loyalty, justice over reconciliation, my own integrity over protection of the person who had once been my closest friend. It felt both like the most important decision I'd ever made, and like the saddest one. What I didn't know yet was that Kellen's investigation had already uncovered evidence that would make my decision even more complicated, and that the web of lies Lena had woven was much larger and more dangerous than either of us had realized. The next afternoon would bring revelations that would transform my understanding of what I was really fighting for, and what the stakes of this battle actually were. Cafe Venetia was the kind of place where tech workers went to have sensitive conversations, tucked away in a quiet corner of Palo Alto, with enough ambient noise to provide privacy but intimate enough seating to allow for serious discussion. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table in the back corner, positioning myself where I could see the entrance and monitor who might overhear our conversation. Kellen Vaughn looked exactly like I'd expected an investigative journalist to look. Rumpled khakis, faded button-down shirt, wire-rimmed glasses that had seen better days, and the kind of intense, observant expression that suggested he noticed details other people missed. He was probably 45, with graying hair and the weary demeanor of someone who'd spent years uncovering unpleasant truths about people in power. "Mira Patel?" he said, approaching my table with a messenger bag that looked like it had survived several investigative expeditions. "That's me." He sat down across from me and immediately pulled out a digital recorder, setting it on the table between us but not yet turning it on. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said. "Tariq mentioned you might have information relevant to my research into Lena Patel and Breathe Easy, but he didn't provide specifics." "What exactly are you investigating?" I asked. Kellen leaned back in his chair, studying me with the kind of careful attention that made me understand why people found him unsettling. "I'm working on a story about credential inflation and identity fraud in the tech startup world," he said. "Specifically, entrepreneurs who misrepresent their educational backgrounds, work experience, or role in developing the technologies their companies are built around." "And Lena caught your attention?" "Lena raised red flags when I was researching a broader piece about successful female entrepreneurs in mental health technology," he replied. "Her story was compelling. Brilliant young woman overcomes personal struggles to develop breakthrough innovation. But when I started fact-checking the details, things didn't add up." Kellen pulled a notebook from his bag and flipped to a page, covered with handwritten notes and what looked like a timeline of events. "According to every interview she's given, Lena spent 3 years pursuing advanced bioengineering research at Stanford while developing the Breathe Easy technology," he said. "But Stanford has no record of her ever being enrolled in their bioengineering program. Her undergraduate degree is in communications from UC Berkeley, and after graduation, she worked in PR for various tech companies until being laid off 8 months ago." I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness, hearing someone else articulate the lies I'd been living with for months. "That's not all," Kellen continued. "I've been interviewing other entrepreneurs and researchers in the anxiety detection space, and several of them mentioned encountering a Stanford graduate student who was doing innovative work in wearable mental health technology. But when I asked for the student's name, they all said Mira something, or a young woman named Mira." He looked at me directly. "Would you be willing to tell me your connection to this story?" I took a deep breath and made the decision that would change everything. "I invented Breathe Easy," I said. "Every aspect of the technology, the anxiety detection algorithms, the biometric monitoring system, the intervention protocols, I developed in my apartment over the course of 18 months, while struggling with my own anxiety disorders." Kellen turned on his digital recorder. "Can you walk me through the timeline?" he asked. For the next 2 hours, I told him everything. The personal struggle with anxiety that had inspired my research. The months of development work, coding, and prototype testing. Lena's unemployment and growing desperation. Her gradual involvement in helping me develop business plans and marketing materials. The night I discovered her investor presentation that credited her as the sole inventor. The confrontation, the funding announcement, her job offer, my refusal. Kellen took detailed notes while recording, occasionally asking clarifying questions or requesting specific evidence I might be able to provide. "Do you have documentation that proves your role in developing the technology?" he asked. "Everything," I said. "Original research notes, prototype development logs, academic records, even email exchanges with Lena that show the timeline of her involvement versus my innovation. Would you be willing to share that documentation?" This was the moment of no return. Providing evidence to an investigative journalist meant fully committing to exposing Lena's fraud, accepting that our relationship might be permanently destroyed, and potentially triggering consequences I couldn't predict or control. "Yes," I said. Kellen nodded and made another note. "There's something else you should know," he said. "Lena isn't the only entrepreneur I'm investigating for this story. I've identified at least 6 other cases of people who've built successful companies around stolen or misrepresented innovations. This is part of a pattern?" "It's part of an epidemic," he replied. "The startup funding environment has become so competitive, and the pressure to present compelling founder narratives so intense, that misrepresentation has become commonplace. Investors are funding personalities and stories as much as they're funding actual innovations." The implications were staggering. If Lena's theft was part of a broader pattern of fraud in the tech industry, then exposing her story might contribute to addressing a systemic problem that was affecting many more people than just me. "When will your story run?" I asked. "I'm hoping to publish in 3 weeks," Kellen said. "But I want to give Lena an opportunity to respond to the allegations before the piece goes live." "You're going to interview her?" "I'm going to present her with the evidence I've gathered and ask for her explanation," he replied. "It's possible she'll admit to misrepresentation and offer some form of correction or clarification." I almost laughed at the suggestion. Lena had been doubling down on her lies for months, expanding them into new areas of stolen research. The idea that she'd suddenly embrace honesty when confronted by a journalist seemed impossibly optimistic. "What happens to the company if your story proves she committed fraud?" I asked. Kellen's expression became serious. "That would depend on how investors and business partners respond to the revelations. Companies have survived founder scandals before, but usually only when the underlying technology and business model remain sound." "The underlying technology is sound," I said. "I created it to work. But if the company was built on fraudulent representations to investors, there could be legal and financial consequences that go far beyond public embarrassment." I thought about the employees Lena had hired, the people who joined the company, believing they were working for a brilliant innovator, the patients who might eventually benefit from anxiety detection technology if the product reached market successfully. "I need some time to think about this," I said. "Of course," Kellen replied. "But I should mention that my investigation will continue regardless of your level of participation. I have enough evidence to write a story questioning Lena's credentials and background. Your documentation would make the piece more comprehensive and definitive, but it's not necessary for me to proceed." The revelation that Kellen's investigation would continue with or without my cooperation was both liberating and terrifying. I'd been wrestling with the moral complexity of potentially destroying my sister's career. But if that destruction was inevitable, regardless of my choices, then my decision became simpler. Participate in ensuring the truth was told accurately, or remain silent while someone else told a story that might be incomplete or biased. "I'll send you the documentation tonight," I said. Kellen packed up his recording equipment and notebooks, but before leaving, he handed me another business card. "My direct number is on the back," he said. "If you have any questions or concerns, between now and publication, call me immediately." As I drove back to Berkeley that evening, I felt like I was in the final stages of a chess game, where every remaining move would determine the ultimate outcome. By providing evidence to Kellen, I'd essentially put Lena in checkmate, but I still wasn't sure whether I was playing for justice or revenge. That night, I spent 4 hours organizing and scanning documents, my original research notes for the anxiety detection algorithms, prototype development logs with timestamps that predated Lena's involvement, academic transcripts proving my bioengineering background, even photos of my early device prototypes with metadata that would establish when they'd been created. As I uploaded files to send to Kellen, I came across a folder of emails I'd exchanged with Lena during our months of collaboration. Reading through them again, I was struck by how excited and supportive she'd seemed during the early stages of the project. "This is going to change everything for people struggling with anxiety," she'd written in one message. "I'm so proud of what you've created, and I can't wait to help you bring it to the world." Another email, sent just 2 weeks before her betrayal, read, "Working with you on this has reminded me why I love innovation and problem solving. Thank you for letting me be part of something this important." The sincerity in those messages made her subsequent theft even more painful. She hadn't stolen from a stranger or a business competitor. She'd stolen from someone who'd trusted her completely, someone who'd viewed their collaboration as an expression of family loyalty and shared values. By the time I finished preparing the documentation for Kellen, it was nearly 3 a.m. I sat in my studio apartment, surrounded by evidence of my own innovation and my sister's betrayal, preparing to trigger a sequence of events that would expose the truth, but also potentially destroy the last remnants of our family relationship. I sent the email to Kellen with a simple message. "Here's everything you need. Please let me know when you plan to contact Lena." His response came within minutes. "Received. Thank you. I'll reach out to her tomorrow." As I finally went to bed, I realized that within 24 hours, Lena would know that her carefully constructed narrative was about to be exposed, and that her sister, the person she'd betrayed most deeply, had been the one to provide the evidence that would bring it all down. The endgame was about to begin. Kellen's call came at 2:17 p.m. the following day, while I was in the middle of a particularly complex calculation for my thesis research. The interruption was unwelcome until I heard the urgency in his voice. "Mira, we have a problem," he said without preamble. "I need you to meet me immediately. Something's happened that changes everything." "What kind of something?" "The kind that makes this story much bigger than credential fraud," he replied. "Can you be at Cafe Venetia in an hour?" "I'll be there." I found Kellen pacing outside the cafe, his phone pressed to his ear, having what sounded like an intense conversation with an editor. When he saw me approaching, he ended his call and motioned for me to follow him inside. "We're not sitting," he said. "We're going for a drive. This conversation needs to happen somewhere more private." 10 minutes later, we were driving through the hills above Palo Alto in Kellen's battered Honda Accord, heading toward an overlook that provided a clear view of the South Bay and enough isolation to ensure our conversation wouldn't be overheard. "I contacted Lena this morning," he said, as we pulled into the scenic turnout. "I told her I was working on a story about successful entrepreneurs in mental health technology and asked if she'd be willing to participate in an interview." "How did she respond?" "She was enthusiastic," Kellen replied. "Eager to talk about her innovations, her vision for the company, her plans for future product development. We scheduled a video interview for this afternoon." "Past tense scheduled?" Kellen turned off the car and faced me directly. "She called me back 2 hours later in a complete panic. Said she needed to move our interview to next week because she was dealing with a family emergency." I felt my stomach drop. "What kind of family emergency?" "The kind where her sister, that would be you, had apparently threatened to go public with false allegations about the origins of Breathe Easy technology. The accusation hit me like a physical blow." "She said I threatened her?" "She said you were struggling with mental health issues, that you'd become obsessed with claiming credit for work you'd only contributed to peripherally, and that you'd been making increasingly desperate attempts to undermine her success. I stared out at the sprawling Silicon Valley landscape below us, trying to process the fact that Lena had somehow learned about my conversation with Kellen and had immediately constructed a counter-narrative that positioned me as an unstable sister making false accusations against her successful sibling. How could she know I talked to you? That's what I'm trying to figure out, Kellen said. Either someone told her, or she's been monitoring your communications, or she's got other sources of information that we don't know about. The implications were chilling. If Lena had somehow discovered my involvement in Kellen's investigation, it meant she'd been watching me more closely than I'd realized and was prepared to fight back with strategies I hadn't anticipated. What else did she tell you? Kellen pulled out his phone and scrolled to what looked like notes from their conversation. She said you'd been struggling with anxiety and depression since college, that the family had been worried about your mental health for years, and that your claims about inventing Breathe Easy were part of a pattern of grandiose delusions related to your psychological condition. She's using my own anxiety against me. She's not just using it, Kellen replied. She's weaponizing it. According to her narrative, your mental health struggles were actually what inspired her to develop anxiety detection technology in the first place, and your current accusations are proof of how desperately this technology is needed. The strategy was diabolical in its cleverness. By framing my legitimate accusations as symptoms of mental illness, Lena had found a way to discredit my credibility, while simultaneously reinforcing her own heroic narrative as someone developing technology to help people like her troubled sister. Did you tell her you'd already spoken with me? No, Kellen said. I wanted to understand her version of events before revealing what I knew. But here's the thing. Her story doesn't hold up to basic fact-checking. He pulled out a folder filled with documents I recognized as the evidence I'd provided the previous day. Your academic records prove you're enrolled in Stanford's bioengineering program, he continued. Your research notes are dated and comprehensive. Your prototype development logs show consistent progress over 18 months. Meanwhile, Lena has no technical background, no documented research experience, and no credible explanation for how someone with a communications degree could have developed sophisticated bioengineering technology. But she's getting ahead of the story, I said. If she convinces people I'm mentally unstable before your article comes out, it won't matter how much evidence you have. She'll have already discredited the source. Kellen nodded grimly. Which is why we need to move faster than originally planned. What do you mean? I mean, instead of waiting 3 weeks to publish, I'm accelerating the timeline, he said. My editor has agreed to fast-track the story if I can provide definitive proof of fraud within the next 48 hours. What kind of definitive proof? Kellen was quiet for a moment, staring out at the valley below us. The kind that requires you to go on the record, publicly, with your real name attached to your allegations. The request felt like being asked to jump off a cliff without knowing what was at the bottom. Going on the record meant abandoning any possibility of resolving this privately, accepting that my accusations against Lena would become public knowledge, and opening myself up to whatever retaliation she might devise. If I do that, there's no going back, I said. There's already no going back, Kellen replied. Lena knows you've been talking to journalists about her background. She's preparing to fight this battle whether you engage or not. The question is whether you want to fight it with truth and evidence on your side, or let her control the narrative while you remain silent. I thought about the emails I'd read the night before, about the sister who'd once celebrated my achievements and expressed genuine excitement about collaborating on something meaningful. That person seemed like a stranger now, replaced by someone willing to use my mental health struggles as a weapon against me. What would going on the record involve? A recorded video interview where you present your evidence and tell your story in your own words, Kellen said. Full disclosure of your identity, your relationship to Lena, and your role in developing the technology she's claimed as her own. When? Tomorrow morning. I've reserved studio time at a facility in San Francisco. If you agree, we'll conduct the interview. I'll finish writing the story tomorrow afternoon, and it will publish Thursday morning. That's less than 72 hours from now. which is how long it will take for Lena to fully implement whatever strategy she's developing to discredit you," Kellen replied. "If we wait longer, we'll be responding to her narrative instead of establishing the truth first." I closed my eyes and tried to imagine the conversation I'd need to have with my parents. The reactions from classmates and professors who'd read about our family drama in a tech publication, the long-term implications of publicly accusing my sister of fraud. But I also tried to imagine living with the knowledge that I'd remained silent, while lies about my own work became accepted truth, while someone else built a career around innovations I'd created, while theft and deception were rewarded with success and recognition. "I'll do it," I said. Kellen nodded but didn't look relieved. "I want you to understand what you're signing up for," he said. "Once this story publishes, you'll be at the center of a very public controversy. Lena will likely double down on her narrative about your mental health. Her investors and business partners will be forced to take sides. Your family relationships will be permanently altered." "They're already permanently altered," I replied. "The only question is whether they're altered by truth or by lies." "There's one more thing," Kellen said. "Something I discovered this afternoon that makes this story even more significant." He pulled out another document, what looked like a financial report or investor prospectus. "Breathe Easy isn't just raising $2.7 million, he said. "They're in the middle of negotiations for a Series B round that would value the company at $50 million. I stared at the number, trying to process the magnitude of what Lena had built around my stolen technology. $50 million? Based on projections for scaling the anxiety detection technology and expanding into other mental health applications," Kellen continued. "Applications that, according to your research notes, are all based on ideas you developed and shared with her during your collaboration." The implications hit me like a tsunami. This wasn't just about credit for a single invention anymore. Lena was building an empire valued at $50 million around a comprehensive portfolio of my innovations, and if I didn't act now, she'd have the resources and credibility to make that theft permanent. "When is the Series B supposed to close?" I asked. "Next month," Kellen replied, "which means our story will publish just as investors are conducting their final due diligence. And when they discover the founder lied about inventing the core technology, the deal will collapse," Kellen said simply. "Along with the company's credibility, Lena's reputation, and probably her ability to ever raise funding again." We sat, in his car overlooking Silicon Valley, both of us understanding that we were discussing the complete destruction of everything Lena had built over the past year. "She brought this on herself," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "She did," Kellen agreed. "But that doesn't make the consequences any less devastating." As he drove me back to my car, I realized I'd committed to an action that would either vindicate my integrity or forever mark me as the person who destroyed her sister's life over a business dispute. The interview was scheduled for 10 a.m. Thursday morning. In less than 24 hours, I'd be sitting in front of a camera, telling the world who really invented Breathe Easy and what it had cost me to watch someone else take credit for my life's work. There would be no going back after that. The video interview took place in a small studio in Soma, surrounded by professional lighting equipment that made everything feel more serious and permanent than I'd expected. Kellen sat across from me with a list of questions, while a camera operator named Marcus adjusted angles and sound levels for optimal recording quality. "Remember," Kellen said as we prepared to begin, "this is your opportunity to tell your story, in your own words. Don't worry about being perfect. Worry about being honest." For 45 minutes, I laid out everything. The development of Breathe Easy from concept to working prototype. Lena's unemployment and growing desperation. Her gradual involvement in business planning, followed by systematic theft of credit for work she hadn't done. The confrontation. The funding announcement. The family dinner where she'd finally admitted the truth. But I also talked about the sister I'd lost in the process. The person who'd once supported my dreams and celebrated my achievements, who'd helped me see possibilities beyond my own limited vision for what my technology could accomplish. Do you regret creating the device? Kellen asked near the end of our session. No, I said. I regret trusting someone who wasn't worthy of that trust. But the technology itself, the possibility that it could help people manage anxiety and prevent panic attacks, that's still important. That's still worth pursuing. What do you want to happen now? I thought about the question for a long moment, knowing my answer would be preserved on video and potentially quoted in articles about this controversy for years to come. I want the truth to be known, I said finally. I want credit for work. I actually did. And I want to build something better than what was stolen from me. The article published Thursday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific Time. By 7:30, my phone was ringing with calls from reporters, investors, and Stanford faculty who'd seen the story. By 9 a.m., Breath Easy fraud was trending on social media, with thousands of people sharing opinions about startup culture, family betrayal, and the importance of protecting intellectual property. Lena's response came in the form of a carefully crafted statement released through Breathe Easy's PR firm at 11 a.m. We are aware of recent allegations made by a former collaborator regarding the development of our core technology. While we respect this individual's contributions to early business planning discussions, the characterization of their role in our innovation process is significantly overstated. Breathe Easy's technology represents years of dedicated research and development by our founder and CEO, Lena Patel, in collaboration with a team of qualified engineers and mental health professionals. We stand behind the integrity of our work and look forward to continuing our mission of democratizing mental healthcare through innovative technology. The statement was professionally written and strategically vague, but it couldn't address the fundamental evidence problem. Lena still had no credible explanation for how someone with a communications degree and no bioengineering background could have developed sophisticated anxiety detection algorithms. The real reckoning came Monday afternoon, when Hartwell Ventures, the lead investor in Breathe Easy's Series A round, announced they were conducting an expanded due diligence review of the company's technology origins and leadership credentials. By Wednesday, 2 other investors had formally withdrawn from the pending Series B round. By Friday, Lena had resigned as CEO. The call came Saturday evening while I was in my studio apartment, trying to focus on thesis work that felt simultaneously more important and less relevant than it had a week earlier. Mira. Lena's voice was barely recognizable, small, defeated, stripped of the confident authority she'd cultivated during her months as a celebrated entrepreneur. I saw the news, I said. I lost everything. Her words were punctuated by what sounded like crying. The company, the funding, the job offers, the speaking engagements, everything I built is gone. I wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly I felt sad. For both of us, for our family, for the opportunities we'd both lost in the wreckage of her choices. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Are you? She asked. Because it feels like you destroyed my life on purpose. You destroyed your own life, I replied quietly. I just refused to let you destroy mine in the process. The company could have succeeded, Lena said. We could have helped millions of people with anxiety disorders. Instead, the technology will probably never reach market because you needed to prove a point about credit and recognition. The accusation stung because it contained a grain of truth. My decision to expose Lena's fraud had indeed contributed to destroying a company that might have brought helpful technology to people who needed it. But it had also preserved the possibility that the technology could be developed honestly, by people who would credit the actual innovators and build sustainable businesses around authentic achievements rather than stolen work. I'm going to license the technology, I said. What? The core algorithms, the detection protocols, the intervention strategies. I'm going to license them to companies that are interested in developing anxiety management devices, I explained. Properly, legally, with appropriate credit for the actual inventors. You can't do that. The technology belongs to Breathe Easy. The technology belongs to me, I corrected. I have comprehensive documentation proving I developed it before Lena was involved, and her resignation as CEO effectively acknowledges that the company was built on false premises. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I never meant for it to happen this way, Lena said finally. I know, I replied. But meaning and choosing are different things. You chose this outcome every time you decided to expand your lies instead of correcting them. Can you forgive me? It was the same question she'd asked at our family dinner months earlier, but now it carried the weight of real consequences and genuine loss. I don't know, I said honestly, but I hope someday we can figure out how to be sisters again. 6 months later, I was defending my thesis on predictive algorithms for mental health intervention technology to a committee of Stanford faculty who were well aware of the public controversy surrounding my research. But they were also impressed by the depth and innovation of work that had clearly been developed over years of dedicated study. Dr. Rachel Chen, my thesis advisor, stayed after the defense to discuss next steps. 3 companies have expressed interest in licensing your technology, she said. All of them understand the importance of proper attribution and ethical development practices. Which one do you recommend? The startup founded by your former lab partner, she replied with a smile. Tariq Salim has been building a team specifically to develop your anxiety detection platform. He's raised $1.8 million in seed funding and wants to offer you a position as Chief Technology Officer. Of my own technology? Of technology you'll continue developing, with proper credit and appropriate equity stakes, Dr. Chen clarified. The way it should have been from the beginning. I thought about the irony. Being offered the same title Lena had tried to give me a year earlier, but under completely different circumstances. This time, I'd be the recognized inventor. This time, the company would be built on honesty rather than theft. This time, I'd be working with someone who understood the difference between collaboration and appropriation. I'm interested, I said. The meeting with Tariq took place at the same Palo Alto creamery where he'd first shown me Kellen's business card. But this time we were discussing partnership rather than exposure, possibilities rather than problems. I want to build something that honors what you created while expanding it beyond what either of us could accomplish alone, he said. Full transparency, shared equity, collaborative decision-making. What about Lena's patents? Her applications were rejected when the patent office discovered they were based on prior art. Specifically, your prior art, Tariq replied. Our legal team has already filed new applications with proper attribution. As I signed the partnership agreement that would make me co-founder and CTO of Mindful Technologies, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment, the betrayal that had nearly destroyed my confidence, the family relationships that were still healing, the difficult choice to prioritize truth over loyalty. But I also thought about the technology itself, the algorithms and protocols I'd developed to help people like me manage anxiety more effectively. In a few months, those innovations would finally reach the people they were designed to help, developed by a company built on authentic collaboration rather than stolen credit. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Proud of you, Beta, Dad. And I will be at the launch event next month. Another message followed from an unknown number. Saw the TechCrunch article about your new company. Congratulations on the recognition you deserve. Kay Kellen's investigation had ultimately led to a broader series of articles about startup fraud that had prompted new due diligence standards in the venture capital industry. Several other entrepreneurs had been exposed for misrepresenting their credentials or stealing technology from collaborators. The story had become larger than just my family drama. It had contributed to real changes in how the tech industry verified founder claims and protected intellectual property. But the most unexpected message came that evening, as I was preparing for another late night of development work in my new office space in Palo Alto. Mira, I know I have no right to ask this, but I wanted you to know I'm proud of what you've built. You were always the brilliant one. I just forgot that for a while and made choices I can't undo. Congratulations on your company. Lena, I stared, at the text for a long time before responding. "Thank you. I hope you find your own path forward." "I'm trying," came her quick reply. "Maybe someday we can try being sisters again." "Maybe," I wrote back. "But it will have to be based on who we really are, not who we pretend to be." As I settled into my new workspace, surrounded by whiteboards covered with algorithms and prototypes for next-generation anxiety management technology, I realized I'd gained something more valuable than recognition or revenge: the knowledge that I could stand up for my own integrity without losing my capacity for forgiveness. The technology that had once been stolen was now being developed honestly. The sister who had betrayed me was beginning to acknowledge the truth about what she'd done. The family that had been fractured by lies was slowly healing through acceptance of reality. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I first created Breathe Easy in our shared apartment, but it was an ending I could live with. One built on truth, characterized by growth, and open to the possibility that even broken relationships could be rebuilt if both people were willing to start from honesty. 6 months from now, when the first Mindful Technologies devices reached market, they would help thousands of people manage anxiety more effectively. And for the first time since creating the original prototype, I would be able to watch that success, knowing I'd earned it through innovation rather than appropriation, through courage rather than convenience. The invention had been stolen, but the inventor had survived. The story dropped on a Thursday morning. By lunchtime, it had ignited a wildfire across the tech world. Founder fraud at Breathe Easy, a sister's invention, a startup built on lies. The headline dominated the front page of Silicon Validity, quickly picked up by TechCrunch, Forbes, Wired, and half a dozen YouTube channels dissecting startup culture. Within hours, Breathe Easy Exposed trended on social media. Mira's face, earnest and raw in Kellen Vaughn's video interview, contrasted with Lena's polished persona in conference panels and investor videos. The public had found its underdog and its villain. Lena issued a statement that afternoon. It was carefully worded, leaning heavily on vague language like miscommunication, shared inspiration, and family misunderstandings. But the damage was already done. A Stanford spokesperson confirmed that Lena had never attended the university. Former colleagues at her PR jobs came forward, revealing she'd never expressed any interest in bioengineering prior to Mira's project. The technical schematics released with Mira's interview were time-stamped and authenticated by Stanford faculty. It was undeniable. Breathe Easy was Mira Patel's brainchild. Investors began pulling out within 48 hours. By Monday morning, Breathe Easy's Series B funding collapsed. Hartwell Ventures released a terse public statement citing irreconcilable discrepancies regarding company leadership and intellectual property. That same day, Mira received an unexpected call from the Office of the Attorney General. "Ms. Patel," the woman said, "we're investigating potential wire fraud related to misrepresentation during the Series A funding process. We understand. You may be a key witness." Mira's stomach sank. This wasn't just media fallout. This was criminal. Lena had gone dark. No posts, no interviews, no contact. Even her closest friends didn't know where she was. Their parents, caught between heartbreak and fury, asked Mira to give Lena space. Mira understood. She just couldn't forget. Her lawyer, an IP specialist named Brandy Tran, called her the following week. "You have options," she said. "You can sue for damages, request ownership of the Breathe Easy trademark, and file civil claims for fraud and emotional distress. But be prepared for a drawn-out battle." Mira stared at the contract Lena had offered her months ago. CTO of a company she never truly belonged to. "I don't want a piece of the ruins," she said. "I want to build something untouched by betrayal." Still, Mira filed for full intellectual property rights, effectively freezing the company from repurposing her designs. A month later, Lena's lawyer offered a private settlement. Mira declined. "I don't want money," she told Brandy. "I want the truth to stand on its own." The last headline about Lena Patel appeared 6 weeks later. Disgraced founder steps down after IP scandal. Then she disappeared. But for Mira, it was just the beginning of what came next. Mira didn't sleep the night after her interview aired. Not because of guilt, though there was plenty of that, but because her inbox had exploded with messages from researchers, engineers, investors, and strangers. Some offered condolences, some offered partnerships, some offered funding, but the one that changed everything came from a name she hadn't heard in years. Dr. Hannah Voss, former director, Mental Health Technologies Division. NIH subject line, "Your work matters. Let's talk." Hannah had been a guest lecturer in one of Mira's Stanford seminars. She'd remembered Mira's early Breathe Easy prototype and wanted to help. Your tech could revolutionize how we manage not just anxiety, but early intervention. For PTSD, bipolar, and trauma responses, Hannah said during their first Zoom call. We're looking to fund a new grant cycle for real-time, low-barrier mental health diagnostics. You're exactly what we need. It was the lifeline Mira didn't know she needed. With Hannah's help and a new lab at UC Berkeley's Innovation Hub, Mira launched Neural Bloom, a public benefit startup focused on ethically built, science-backed mental health wearables. No spin, no PR flourishes, no false founders, just data, empathy, and tech that worked. She built a team, not a flashy one, but brilliant. 2 grad students she'd mentored, Tariq, who quit his job to become head of R&D, a hardware engineer from Mumbai, a clinical psychologist, a UX designer who had once been hospitalized for panic attacks and wanted to make the interface feel human. The first version of the new device was sleeker, smarter, and broader in scope than Breathe Easy. It tracked not only biometric data, but also social behavior patterns. How often the user connected with others, how long they spent in isolation, whether speech patterns indicated emotional strain. Privacy and consent were prioritized. They called it Pulse Point. And in less than 9 months, they had their first clinical pilot with 2 major hospitals and a university counseling center. The difference this time? Everyone knew who had invented it. One night, after a particularly long round of QA testing, Mira scrolled through early user feedback. One comment stuck with her. I didn't think anything could stop my spiral, but when PulsePoint caught it, before it started, and talked me down, I cried, not because I was afraid, but because I felt seen. Mira printed it out and taped it to her apartment wall. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but it was no longer defining her. It had sharpened her, tempered her, turned her into someone who no longer needed permission to exist in her own brilliance. The letter came in April, a simple white envelope with her sister's handwriting on the front. Mira turned it over twice before opening it. Her hands shook only a little. Dear Mira, I don't know if I deserve to be heard by you. I wouldn't blame you if you tore this up without reading. But I hope you don't. I've spent the last few months away. Off-grid, therapy, silence, self-confrontation. The kind you can't pay a PR firm to clean up. What I did was inexcusable. It started as fear, turned into ambition, and ended in theft. I convinced myself that you needed me to bring your idea to the world, that I was the only one who could. That lie made it easier to keep lying. I built my confidence on your back and then called it my own scaffolding. I'm sorry. Not just for what I took, but for how I made you feel invisible inside your own story. I've left the startup world. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I'm trying to rebuild from truth. If you ever want to talk, not as business partners, not as adversaries, but as sisters, I'll be here. Love. Lena. Mira read it 3 times. Then she placed it in the drawer where she kept her original prototype, now in a glass display case. She didn't respond. Not yet. But that weekend, she took a long walk through San Francisco's Mission District, the neighborhood where it had all started. The burrito shop where she'd coded the original detection script. the thrift store couch she'd cried into, the little bodega her parents had owned for years. She wasn't that girl anymore. She wasn't the quiet one in the background. She wasn't the overlooked sister or the silent genius. She was Mira Patel, founder of Neural Bloom, inventor of PulsePoint, Stanford bioengineer, startup survivor. She stopped at a mural that hadn't been there before. It depicted a woman with her heart open, tech circuitry woven through her chest like veins. At the bottom were the words, "The future will not be stolen, it will be reclaimed." Mira smiled. Then she turned and walked forward. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.